might give you some ideas, and some of these.
We're gonna meet tomorrow at the 2 o'clock time, like we did with the Zootopia, to discuss what.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a good idea. I'll be in the just here, like in this area, because I'll be tutoring here. So that's what you mean, right? All right, cool. See you then.
This one is a little bit more cryptic than the other one that I'm printing off, because the other one is a lot more literal. It just talks about all of the things that can be, in fact, artwork. I'll give you one for Ben, too, if you're going to submit it before I will.
Nice.
So this one is from an artist named Klaus Oldenburg, who's also a conceptual artist, or can be considered a conceptual artist. And this is a statement I am for. And this is the one that people thought I was crazy with. As you were reading some of these things. Fresh off the copy, you're all warm. Like holding up the page. I forgot about these two. I'm glad that I was reminded of these two. They're so helpful.
Did you know they're actually closed at 4?
What?
The Crane Center?
They do?
Yeah, that was not me.
They let you in. They're closing at 4.
But like,
I'm gonna keep that Facebook post in mind when you're reading this.
Do it, because some of these are really weird. Some of them are, but some of them are weird. I just want to feed you.
thank you.
Okay, so like I said, I'll be available via email if you need any help on these or questions about these over the weekend. I'm sure I'll be around. And then I'll be here on Tuesday. Today was my bad week, but yeah, I got chemo on Monday, and then right between classes, I went and had to get a shot. It hurts. Not a shot itself. Yeah, powering through it.
Thank you. You too.
I'm on painkillers and another drug, so I'll be
Oh, thank you.
yesterday. Alright. So let me know if you guys have any questions about this or your final project. I'll see you on Tuesday. We'll finish up with those presentations. We can talk about this more if you like. I'll try to find some, I know I have some examples of both the animation project and the conceptual project. I just need to find them. Hope they're not on one of my drives that died.
Yeah. So my idea is that we start recording ourselves, or we're talking about our project, and we're going to our classes. Bye, Quinn. Yeah. While we're going to our classes and everything, and the idea would be like, this is part of the process. So there's this idea of process art, and there's this idea of conceptual art. We're both learning the concepts, and we're in the process of creating our art in our art classes, right? So this would be like, so these recordings would be part of it, right? And you were thinking like, you said you kind of had the same idea, and it would be like, we'd be playing with the idea, we'd be like challenging the idea of video, where like it would just be a black video and just audio, right? Is it just audio or is it just video? That would be an element, right?
Just audio, yeah, I
Yeah.
was thinking that too.
And I really like that you want to incorporate like the social justice element to it, because I think that's an important part of conceptual art too. But we just layer that on top of there and just have layers on layers of meaning and ideas in the audio. We could have it ask several questions, right?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine with me. I was kind of wondering how we were going to just squeeze a whole bunch of quotes into like
Yeah.
a 3 or 4 minute
Mhm.
thing. I was thinking of just
Yeah.
constantly repeating it to try to get people to thinking,
Mhm.
but 3 minutes of that would get kind of old.
Yeah, we just have a discussion, and then we just layer the discussion over it, and we like get experts from our class in there, and like let's just like look up social justice right now, and just kind of see what's going on. So
She actually said social injustice.
social injustice, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Um, so this is just a forum on Quora. What are types of social injustice? What are some examples? Social injustice issues would be things like unfair labor practices, racial discrimination, discrimination due to gender, orientation, ethnicity, and age. Also, the death penalty, inequality of healthcare, public school, equality in poorer income areas, etc. It is an issue affecting society where there are differences based on certain criteria, generally affecting marginalized groups or those who are not considered equal to the norm. And I think that's a pretty good definition of it, but I think if we want to know what social injustice is, we want to know what social justice is too, right? Mhm. So like, social justice is a concept of fair and just relations between the individual and society.
Maybe we could also think about it religious-wise, like if like religion is technically a part of a lot of people's lives, I think it's just as much as gender and everything. Yet a lot of schools really frown at this. A lot of people just really frown at the idea of sharing religious ideas out in public with each other.
I can definitely see where you're coming from with that. Yeah, so let's just look that up. Religious social injustice. So this is an article from Springer. It's an actual study, right? So social injustices of religion or belief. And this is just the abstract right here. The distinction between social inequality and social injustice was introduced in the previous chapter. I don't know what that is, but it's argued that religious inequalities can be addressed by a range of measures involving education, social class equality, and gender equality that do not refer to religious identity. Religious inequality is not therefore solely caused by injustice suffered by individuals as a consequence of their religious identity, as a key government report made that not all inequality stems from discrimination, and therefore not all inequality can be addressed by legal remedy. In this chapter, however, we will focus on the issue of religious injustice and the law and concerning belief. And then it has like a little excerpt of 2 pages here. Our main concern is with minority religions, once again, especially Islam, which is thought to bear the brunt of religious injustice. The question of Christian sectarianism in Scotland is also addressed, and its relevance to minority religions in England is discussed. The emphasis on the injustices faced by religious groups or other members within civil society in general, or at the hands of the state. Our main contention is that the evidence available does not support the widespread beliefs of the pervasiveness of religious injustice. Indeed, the discrepancy between the evidence and belief is so marked that it's necessary to invoke a special explanation of it. We identify a prevailing ideology of religious injustice which supports the mistaken beliefs and serves to mask and/or to distort the underlying state of affairs regarding religious injustice. So maybe this is just my interpretation of it, but I think it's saying that religious injustice can't really necessarily be seen in the form of discrimination all the time, but in terms of inequality, depending on like people in certain groups suffering in certain ways, it ends up being a determining factor, making it very hard to address with legal concerns, right? And it's just as it was mentioned earlier, it's probably better to approach it through an education idea, which I agree with. I think that really almost every religion and almost every ideology, just in general, has a lot to contribute towards learning about everything. I mean, you can't have an art history class without talking about like religion in the past. Like, you know, most of European art movements are directly influenced and, if not funded and supported and caused by the church, right? I definitely say that the classics of Rome were definitely based mostly on religion. Right.
Definitely.
What do you think about what we've read so far?
Well, personally, when you think of the different religions, and as you said, and mixed in with education, I think of using reason and logic and evidence, and then kind of combining them with religions to kind of like judge how accurate the religions are, like reputation is just is as important to a religion as the beliefs itself and the people and the reputation of the people who follow them. There's a lot of different religions out there, and there are a lot of people who have deviated from the original whole beliefs to kind of start their own branch of a religion that's different from the original. Also, what?
Wouldn't that just be a different interpretation of the original? Right. I'm not entirely sure. Like I know there's this idea of like. So right now, how does that relate to social inequality? Do you think that promoting equality would be like if you kind of taught people about a specific correct religion, or I don't know what you meant by that?
I think that people should be open to sharing, to letting other people judge and choose those, and like you can guide a person, like try to get a, like try to give you reasons for joining this religion or changing religions.
So you think you think we should have more religious discussions on campus, and people should be able to debate each other about their ideas, right? And that's something we should do, like have just more discussions in general. I think this ties into our project, right, where we're literally having a discussion and speaking about these ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I see emails about discussions and meeting for psychology students, business students, and I know there's a class, I know there's a Christian club here, but I don't really see a lot of like, aside from the clubs, I don't see a lot of openness and communication very much, aside from when discussing history topics.
So do you think people don't like to directly involve their religious beliefs into their learning? And they should be.
Yeah, in their daily lives, and just they're interacting with people. Well, with some people it seems like they're keeping their religious beliefs, their stance on it, like it's just like it's very personal.
But do you think it should be part of the community? But what about the cases where like other people have different beliefs, right? So I can definitely personally sympathize with people who kind of want to keep it as a personal thing. I know that there's some places where I used to live in like...
Yeah, exactly, but people shouldn't need to be afraid to share their beliefs. It's like if you honestly believe that you're right, if you have evidence that a belief to back it up, or if you have if you want to share
So do you think you should be able to evangelize at schools and stuff like that? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
You should be able to spread your religious beliefs through schools.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think
Yeah, the same-
Do you think it's fair if teachers do that though?
I believe that people should, as I said, have of the knowledge to be able to share, to choose a religion. Like I've heard of people who don't teach each their or kids any specific religion because they say that they don't want to like pressure them into choosing, but then and the concept comes up of how are they supposed to choose if they don't know anything about all the religions, all the ups and downs, the past, the present, and
So I think that'd just be the case of like everybody should learn about all the religions as equally as possible. And I don't think necessarily it will be the best to go about it where like we try to convince people to join specific religions, but I think people just gaining knowledge about all religions as much as possible would be a good thing to do. Especially like about religions that aren't very well represented in certain communities. More people are less likely to know about the specifics inside of those religions, and I think it's always good for everybody to learn about those specific ideas and stuff like that. Though I do understand some concerns where people like they're not interested in being taught about certain ideas. Though at schools, I suppose in education, it would be an important thing to bring up because it's something that's an unavoidable topic. Religion is very important to a lot of people around the world.
yeah.
And do you think so? Like when it comes to this idea of like social justice and stuff like that, do you think it's like it would be the just thing to do in order to like it's like you're not doing the person justice unless you teach them about these ideas?
I don't think it's doing religions justice to like the schools are teaching them about cooking, about history, about sciences, but very few, only private schools will teach religion specifically. Private religious schools, well, it's not like.
Do you think
a
it should be
curriculum.
part of the curriculum? Like
Yeah, if-
everybody would be required to take like a world religion class? Do you think it should be a constant part of the curriculum, like just every year, all the time? And like should be part of every class, or should be specific classes for it?
Specific classes like
And they would be required, right?
required or optional. Personally, I'm not 100% sure how high schools and stuff have worked. I was in a private school all my whole life, but yes, I do believe that people should be able to get more like people in public schools who like either don't have a church or they do need to at least know the religious backgrounds.
Yeah, I would definitely think that's important, but one thing that's important to mention is like it's like for justice to truly happen, it would have to be a very inclusive curriculum that brings together a lot of ideas from a lot of different cultures and stuff like that. I would say. Would you agree?
Well, religions are all extremely different, so I think what you mentioned about different courses for different religions would be like a good idea because it's kind of difficult to mix in a lot of different religions into like just one course.
Yeah, it's definitely a very expensive topic, but I would say outside of general knowledge, I would definitely say people would have to be like, that would have to be like their major, because even one religion, even one section of one religion would be way too much for even like a single course to address if you wanted to go into detail about it, right? There's people that dedicate their whole entire lives to getting these majors. There are religious studies and stuff like that in almost every school. There's almost always like specific programs for becoming a pastor, becoming a priest, becoming a theologian. There's a lot of these degrees that you can get, right? And there's a specific curriculum already for that laid out. You can learn, and it's not just like for Christianity. There's also specific tracks for Hinduism, Islam, and all those ideas. But I do think, I ideally agree that there should be a general class where these specific ideas are taught, and like, since like not only religions, but I also think like lots of philosophies. I think like when I'm talking to a lot of people, I think a lot of people are missing specific sections of like not necessarily irreligious philosophies, because like, but there are specific philosophies that they don't necessarily, like specific schools of thought that they don't know about, like they don't know about like.
I know, but I keep seeing a lot of class. I'm in a lot of classes where like people mix one religion for the other. It's pretty close, but still it's not quite like the I Am Malala book. I'm not sure if you've read it, but they talk about how the Taliban and try to use their religion and against them, but theirs flawed. And I keep hearing a lot of instances throughout history where Christians are blamed for a lot of things, but in most of them they mention a pope, and Christianity just doesn't have popes. That's not part of our religion.
It might be part of like Catholic specifically. Yeah.
It is, but yeah, I think a basic study between one and the other is a good idea, because when you don't, everything just gets blurred. Everything gets mixed up.
Yeah, but I don't know. It would take, I don't know. It would take like, you would have to dedicate like several years to learn about all the religions, right? So I would definitely say that the only option that we really have is to just have specific courses that mention it. But again, like, I would just really like to like relate it back to the art project, right? Like, how would we incorporate this idea back into it?
Well, as I said, I could try to like find verses that talk about social justice.
So
there's gotta be. I'm sure there's stuff in my Bible, and I'm sure I could find some on the web.
So you think next time we record audio, I think we should research specific cases where there's verses and ideas and stuff like that that talk about social justice, and we should just read them off. Do you think that's a good idea? If you would prefer, I understand you're Christian, right? If you would prefer, you can focus on finding verses from Christianity, and I can focus on finding verses from other religions and stuff like that, from other cultures.
Yeah, that'd be really great. And I could also talk to my mom. She's done a lot of research on other religions, and she actually does have a thorough understanding of a lot of different religions outside of Christianity. So I'll talk with her about that this weekend.
Yeah, that'd be very good if we can both have verses from other religions too. All right, great.
Okay. I gotta get going.
That's fine. Thank you for coming in and talking. I think we have a very good idea for this project. Oh, that was 20 minutes right there. Nice. Yeah.
No, I think it's certainly poignant, yeah, when we're back in. There is a video. There's technically no audio on this one, but this is a film by Namjoon Pike, and what he did is he took film meter that's not actually film and put it through a projector multiple times, and every time he projected it, of course the projector would create dust and scratches and errors and marks on the film itself. So this became one of his films
Mm.
was in essence blank leader. That, you know, when you use a photocopier, if you photocopy something, you photocopy it again, and you photocopy it again, and you photocopy it again, it degrades in quality. Same thing as like watching VHS over and over again. And the same thing that's happening here to this film meter is that it's being abused by the projector itself.
Uh-huh.
Every time it plays, it adds some more errors to it. And that becomes the actual visual response to the film. It's total complete chance and error. So I see here, guys, it's something like this, but adding audio to it, but maybe no visuals whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Or you might think about what visuals it's called Zen film, but what visuals that you could add to it that would be nothingness or overt or it would have changed the message of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, it's something to think about, but I really like, I don't know, maybe.
Like, how could you draw attention to the fact that it is in fact a video instead of a blank screen?
Mm-hmm. Because it's still it's formatted as a video, it's digital as a video, it's on YouTube or whatever we're gonna upload it to. Like by any like almost everything around it is a video. There's no reason to say that it's not a video, but it challenges the idea of what a video is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like,
I'm putting it within that context.
yeah, okay,
Removed from that context, it wouldn't have the same reason.
I mean, like at the very most, what I would do is put in one single static text, but that's it. It would have to be really relevant though, like maybe just some like white text saying this is a video. Just to remind people that this is a video.
I made this one, and this is kind of along the same lines. It is a video, but it doesn't move, so it doesn't have
Yeah, I remember you showing this
it
stuff.
doesn't have any of the inherent qualities of video other than the fact that this text kind of comes and goes away. And then finally, at the end of the video, this girl just walks past the painting and between painting and the camera. And that's really the only movement in the whole piece itself. When I was at the museum, the actual curator asked me, like, well, how do people know that we own this original artwork and your video isn't the original artwork?
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, that's kind of the point of the video itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm forcing you guys to look at this when no one's standing there and watching it. The only person who does is just walks right past it, so it becomes more important. Me forcing you to watch this or the work hanging on the wall that no one's looking at.
Right.
It's actually a very famous work.
Who painted it? I think is it. Not
I think
sure.
it's the same guy that did Water Lilies.
I keep thinking of that one Impressionist painter that's like really famous for Impressionist paintings. Like he was considered the founder of it, I think.
Somebody can use their Google goggles and look it up. I think it's the same guy that painted Water Lilies.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not positive. I was lucky enough actually. I was lucky enough that they let me in to film that day. I had the whole day to film whatever I wanted, so I could jam without people following me around. You guys have any more questions on your conceptual project, or do you think you got a better understanding?
So I was gonna look up. I was trying to look this up on Blackboard, but I'm having troubles logging in for some reason. I had to change the password. But so, could I get like a basic rundown for this other project? Like, because I know about the one about animation, but this other one with the artist statement, I need a bit more of an update with. Cause
Conceptual?
the conceptual, yeah.
You just want me to print you off the material?
I guess I could help. Yeah. I do remember the examples you gave. Just having a hard time figuring out, sort of the main idea and how to work off of that.
I'll just print them off for you.
Great, thanks.
wanted to run through an idea I had for the final project.
Oh, sure. So what's your idea for your final project? No, I'm sorry.
Well, I was thinking, like, books, like maybe I just gonna send back to the library, just look up, and then when I sat down and opened the book up, I can, it could be hard to like do an animation of like stuff coming out of the book and me watching it as it does.
Would it be hard for you to do animations of things like lights and beams and flowers and lace and ribbon and explosions and water, but it would be hard for you to do like a cartoon character? Because you have to-
I wasn't thinking of anything like that, I was just thinking like, I have some flower books at home, I think possibly using one of those because it would be difficult to make it look like flowers growing out of, some flowers were growing out of the book, or.
Depends on what's already rendered in After Effects. I'm trying to think. I know there are some flowers in there, but I don't know how in fact they are rendered. But you could always make a flower appear like it's coming out of the book and then flying around in the library, and then you like chasing after it and catching it back in the book. That would certainly be possible.
I'm not sure how the library would
Oh,
react with
maybe-
me running around.
They'd be fine with it. Yeah, ask them, they'd be fine. Just remember clean exits, but you'd be fine with that. But that would mean something is totally doable. What's really outside of the scope of the project is like developing some character. You know, you can download skins and character wireframes from the internet and just load them into your program. So it's not to say that you can't borrow a snowman from somebody online and have them pop out of the book. You know, that's possible too. It's just a matter of finding that skin and that wireframe for you to use, that character for you to use. The hard part about it is when you start introducing like camera moves within the editing program itself. So in that form or fashion, it's easier just to have the animation appear and then bring it back into Final Cut Pro or Premiere and then have it fly around and you chase after it. And physically animating something is not easy, and also camera movement within the animation programs is not easy. That's why the great majority of it needs to be in real time, in real place, that you're filming live action, and then a minority of it needs to be the animated components to it, but it needs to play a significant part, and it needs to somehow influence the real world or interact with the real world in some form or fashion. So like, if your flower goes up in a poof of smoke, maybe you have somebody that has a vape pen who blows a poof of smoke and then the flower disappears within the smoke. Like the smoke is real to the flower. Some interaction with the world.
Showing you opening the rose flower,
Oh, totally.
rose coming out and like, I was like falling out and you need to kind of scramble to come up and kind of not in the book anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that would work. You could flop around on the desk or you can even just squish them back down in the book and then close the lid, look around like, and then open it back up and you can start peeking out again. You can close it back down and then, yeah.
And I have another question about the special problems, because field policy.
Okay, we can talk about that in a second. Just let me address the class real quick. So pretty much from now on out, it's gonna be a work day with the exception of one day that I'm gonna have studio instruction for for After Effects and Motion, maybe a week for that, and I'm thinking next week is gonna be the week, for After Effects and Motion, so if you guys wanna learn, the beginnings of that program, the intros to those programs, show up next week. I'm gonna be feeling like crud, so I might find an alternative way to do this, but I'll do it. So we need to get that out of the way, so probably next week is gonna be the intro to animation, After Effects, Motion. And I'll send out an email to everybody to remind them for that. But then every other day is just gonna be a work day until we get to the 26th, which is officially the last day of class. Hopefully everybody's projects are gonna be due, if not, we might be able to extend it into, time.
When's the conceptual one due?
I don't remember, are they due the same day?
One's
It
19th.
says here April 10th.
Yeah.
That's gonna be probably extended. But I want you guys to start working on it, definitely, so don't pretend like the due date's that day. Especially the people that aren't in class, don't tell them. They can freak out about it. You guys can.
You're gonna ignore an hour or two.
You guys can breathe a little easier. I'll send out an email to everybody. Tomorrow, next week's my keynote week, so I'm not gonna be feeling good, but it's important to do that animation stuff, so you guys at least aren't scared to open the program and look at it. Open the program and look at it, it's not terrible, it's not gonna bite you. After Effects works a lot like Photoshop, in the fact that it has layers, it supports layers, supports Photoshop layers. So you can even have a Photoshop document that has multiple layers that you bring into After Effects and animate it. Move those objects around. There's also another way you can do animation for this project too. Possibly. Any other questions about projects or class? If not, you guys are groovy.
Not doing the last presentation.
What's that?
Not doing the last presentation.
You ready?
I've been ready.
Oh, you're ready? Come on.
You just didn't say
Be
anything.
the next contestant.
Don't
I-
forget
I-
that
I talk
USB,
long
because
enough?
I will.
Yeah, I'll talk to you.
No pressure. That's what you get. I'll let you borrow my USB, that's what I did. You should be grateful.
I know there's more people that need to present than you.
Might not be here.
So where is everyone?
Oh, dear.
Oh, I don't see it.
You have the custom view in there.
Yeah, the custom view, I can see what I'm about to see.
Yeah, and you can see your notes again.
No, I don't have that. Just see what I got for next time. I did mine on Corey Martinzo. Basically, I thought he was interesting because he worked on all the video games and stuff like that. And I was kind of interested in like this stuff when I was looking at it. So, he was born May 25th, 1978, and he went to the Oberlin Conservatory of Music to learn how to play classic guitar. But then he kind of switched interest into just technical music and working with that, and became even more interested when he met up with a couple people who were starting up this record company called Beige Records, and they released like their first record, which was called the 8-Bit Conversation Set, or Conservation. Construction. The construction set, which is just a bunch of 8-bit music. If you listen to like NES stuff and old video game like beats and boots from like Atari, that was basically what that record company was working with at the time. And then for his own works, he mostly worked with hacking video games and like consoles. And he was one of the youngest people that retired from the
For there is no respect of persons with God.
Mhm.
Ephesians 6:9. And ye masters, do the same things unto them, forbearing, threatening, knowing that your master also is in heaven, neither is there respect of persons with him.
What do you think that verse means to you?
Both this one and the last one is referring to how God sees all men as sinners. There's no favoritism. There's no higher order among humans, as like there are in society, and even among like masters and servants or slaves. They're all the same. They're all sinners. There's no.
Right, so there's no difference between people in the eyes of God. All right.
1 Corinthians 14:10. There are, it may be, so many kinds of voices in the world, and none of them is without signification.
What does that mean to you?
It's another reference to equality, that there are many different kinds of voices in the world. Well, many people with different languages, different cultures, and all of their voices, everything they have to say is equal. None of them are more important. None of what they have to say, none of their languages and cultures are more important than any of the other ones.
All right.
Psalms 10:2. The wicked in his pride doth persecute the poor. Let them be taken in the devices that they have imagined.
Mm-hmm.
That one's pretty clear of what it means.
Yep.
We see it every day. Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places.
Self-explanatory too.
It's talking about corrupt governments, rulers.
Mm-hmm.
1 Corinthians 3:18. Let no man deceive himself. If any man among you seemeth to be wise in this world, let him become a fool, that he may be wise.
All right.
That one's pretty self-explanatory too.
Right.
Talking about how a lot of people claim to know what's best, to be smarter than the others.
Right, that makes sense to me. I get that.
There are a lot of people out there who say that they have all the answers, but all humans are flawed, so their judgment is just as flawed as well.
Right.
Ephesians 2:2. Wherein in time past ye walked according to the course of this world, according to the princes of the power of the world, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. And this one's referring to, when it says children of disobedience, it's also referring to a corrupt of the rulers, and how we oftentimes follow them anyway.
Right. What's the alternative to following corrupt rulers then, since they're all corrupt and they're all sinners and none of them are wise?
The alternative is to following corrupt rulers is following God.
How do you do that?
By studying His Word, the Bible.
But isn't your interpretation flawed?
Which is why there's a lot of studies about it, and why, and also why it's not recommended to follow just it's like there are a lot of prophets out there and other people who believe that
Mhm.
they know the interpretation, that they've been given the interpretation and by angels or the like, but
So everyone should decide for themselves what justice means to them through the Word of God.
it means that we need to study and try to understand what God's saying,
Right.
since He's the only perfect person, and His way is the only perfect way.
Right.
He sort of like how you don't follow a blind man through a strange place.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any more verses?
That's it.
Yeah, okay. So to be honest, personally, like, if you believe in God and all that stuff, that all makes sense. But if you don't, you're kind of left with this idea. You kind of have to figure it out on your own.
As I said, trying to follow a blind man, and in this I believe that for people like that, in that case, they are the blind man.
All right. We'll see.
Mm.
I think that other people have verses and that their opinions, like you said, are despite their culture, their changes, are all about the equal amount of worth. And I think even if there was like God's words, they would all be revealed differently to everybody depending on how they're reading it, right? That's what ultimate truth would be, because everybody has their own particular situation, and certain verses, I find, when I'm reading religious text or text in general, they apply differently to another person. Do you know about the idea of the death of the author?
I don't believe I've heard of that one.
Yeah, so it's just this idea that once a book is written, once something is made and created and distributed, the author, the person who actually wrote it, doesn't really control it as much. It kind of takes on a life of its own, and people's interpretations of it take over the meaning of that text, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in this, even in the context of Christianity, there is like at least, like last time I checked, if I remember correctly, like at least 200 denominations, if not like thousands. Like it's either 200 or 2,000, I don't remember exactly. But there's a lot of different interpretations, as you said.
Which is also why there are pastors and churches, people
Yeah,
who
but
have been
like you
around for a
said-
while
But
and
like you
studied
said,
it.
there are no wise men, right?
No prophets, I said.
Yeah, no prophets, and then wise men. Like there was a verse that specifically said, if anybody thinks that they're wise, they're actually just let them become fools, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Which is also why people try to a lot of people try to rely on the Bible and should rely solely on the Bible. Well, since the Bible is from God, the Bible is what
mhm.
is the answers to a lot of things, and people shouldn't try to find or come up with or put together their own answers by themselves and just consider themselves wise when they only have little pieces of information here and there.
Right. So, like I said, though, that it kind of ignores the point that I was making, where the fact that you are reading the Bible, you're going to end up coming up with your own interpretation, so you're kind of forced to do that no matter what. You're actually forced to depend on yourself, right? So justice, I would say, is a blurry topic that's hard to see.
The Bible actually doesn't suggest just relying on yourself as far as that. It actually talks about forming churches, about joining churches and seeking help from others. So it's not there's no suggestion of just going off on yourself and just handling it by yourself. It's talking about seeking help from others.
But shouldn't you seek help from wise people? And if no wise people
from others
exist?
and from God as well.
All right.
and there's a difference between seeking and just blind guidance from others and also just seeking advice and input.
Yeah, and I would say that this is a
And
very
there's a very important, and it's very important not to put the people you're seeking advice and input on a pedestal, like try and make them your leader more than God Himself.
right.
I believe people have a tendency of doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that's interesting for sure. I think this is very interesting in the context of the project because we both have different beliefs. I would say very different beliefs and different dispositions. So most of what I'll be doing when it comes to verses, it really, since you were focusing on the Bible because of your religious beliefs, I'll be focusing on other works, both other religious works and other non-religious works and philosophical works. And these will all be people that will claim to know what justice is, which is to say, claim a certain level of wisdom. But you'll say that wisdom is impossible without the Bible, right?
Well, total wisdom and understanding, yes.
All right.
And personally, I believe that there are some people who are sort of on the right track because I believe in the creation and that all of humanity came from one man and all the cultures came in from the fall of Babel. So I believe that that's why so many cultures do share kind of a basic idea, and from that there will be people who are sort of on the right track, but as I said, complete with wisdom and understanding, and only be from the Bible and God.
All right. Okay, I think that's good enough for this part of the interview. Thanks for coming to give the verses and all that. I'll go ahead and add my own later, and we'll see from there.
Mm-hmm. Are you?
So all I'm saying is right now is I'll just go ahead and read off my quotes, and then you can go ahead and I don't know, comment if you feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So he, the messenger, enjoins them to do good and forbids them to do all that is unlawful, makes lawful for them that is pure and unlawful that is filthy, removes their burdens and entanglements in which they are involved. Surah Al-Araf 7:157 from the Quran. Do not squander your wealth wastefully. The squanderers are indeed Satan's brothers, and Satan is ungrateful to his Lord. Surah Bani Israel 17:27. And then the last one from the Quran. Believers, be steadfast for the cause of Allah and be just in bearing witness. Let not a group's hostility to you deviate you from justice. Be just, for it is closer to piety. Have fear of Allah, for He is aware what you do. Surah Al-Madinah 5:8. And that's that for the Quran. And then I have a quote from the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna, whenever righteousness is on the decline, unrighteousness is on the ascent, then I am reincarnated for the protection of the virtuous and the extirpation of the evildoers, and establishing Dharma, righteousness on a firm footing. I am born from age to age. From the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, 7 through 8. And then this is a quote from Theodore Adorno. The poor are prevented from thinking by the discipline of others, the rich by their own. And this is a quote from Rosa Luxemburg. Those who do not move do not notice their chains. And this is a quote from Emma Goldman. Ask for work. If they do not give you work, ask for bread. If they do not give you bread, then take bread. This is a quote from Albert Einstein. The world was promised freedom from fear, but in fact, fear has increased tremendously since the termination of the war. The world was promised freedom from want, but the large parts of the world are faced with starvation while others are living in abundance. Nations were promised liberation and justice, but we have witnessed and are witnessing even now the sad spectacle of liberty.
Do you think you could slow down a bit? Because I'm having trouble keeping track on.
Okay, which ones do you want me to reread? Just the most recent one? You want one of these?
How about you start from the quotes from others?
Like at the top or where?
You said that some of them were quotes from the people had said, not from any Bible or.
Oh yeah, or any religious text. Okay. So from Theodore Adorno, the poor are prevented from thinking by the discipline of others, the rich by their own. From Rosa Luxemburg. Next, those who do not move do not notice their chains. And then the next quote from Emma Goldman. Ask for work. If they do not give you work, ask for bread. If you do not give you bread, then take bread. This is the final one from Albert Einstein. The world was promised freedom from fear, but in fact fear has increased tremendously since the termination of the war. The world was promised freedom from want, but large parts of the world are faced with starvation, while others are living in abundance. The nations were promised liberation and justice, but we have witnessed and are witnessing even now the sad spectacle of quote-unquote liberating armies firing into populations who want their independence and social equality, and supporting in those countries by force of arms such parties and personalities as appear to be most suited to serve vested interests. Those are the quotes that I got.
Yeah. A lot of them were really good, but I can see a few flaws in in most of the ones that I understood. Sorry, you were reading really fast.
Sorry about that.
Just
Mhm.
like I keep thinking from a Christian point of view, and the first verse you read about the law, it just brought me back to a sermon that we had a while ago about tradition versus doctrines, and about how easy it is for people to like the traditions oftentimes start as just something you do, and then suddenly and then eventually it becomes like something you need to do in order to have salvation, and
Alright.
it brought me back to how flawed the law is and how flawed traditions are when people get comfortable with something
So for the context for the first one, so what they mean by law in this case is they mean like Sharia law, which is directly from the religious text, or directly from God in the context of this of that one, like directly in the context of the Quran and everything. So that's what law means in this case. And the messenger is specifically the person that is passing down these laws from God as a representative.
Could I see the verses so I can actually go over them?
Okay.
And this one.
Yeah, so that's from that's okay. So this one is a new one from the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna, when the righteousness is on the decline, unrighteousness is in the ascent, then I am reincarnated for the protection of the virtuous, for the expiation of the evildoers, and for the establishing the Dharma, righteousness, on a firm footing. I am born from age to age. So this is literally about Arjuna, which I believe is a hero in the Bhagavad Gita, who later becomes enlightened, and he will achieve reincarnation just like and come as a hero to help people in bad situations. So that's how justice is remedied in the Bhagavad Gita sometimes.
Yeah, it's very not Christian. We don't believe even reincarnation. We just believe that as soon as we die, we are judged by God on whether or we've been born again and accepted Jesus or not, and then we either go to hell or we go to heaven.
Mhm.
And when he says righteousness, as I keep remembering another sermon we had where we talked that all righteousness came from God. People don't have any natural righteousness in them. So the only way you can have righteousness is to turn to God and
Yeah,
rely on
so
Him to
so
give it to you.
so in this case, it's saying when righteousness is in decline. It doesn't say where it's coming from. But yeah, I understand that your religious views don't sit well with this specifically, and they conflict, and I think that's interesting, especially in the context of social justice. I really personally like the way that we're talking about this. I think it creates a lot of really interesting dynamics.
That first quote you did, it kind of reminds me of one of the quotes that Jenny Holzer used. It was the artist that I did the research on.
Yeah.
The quote was, "Power corrupts.
Hmm.
It comes as no surprise," or something like that.
Yeah. Are you talking about Theodore Adorno?
No, it was Jenny.
No, but like the quote that reminded you of it.
I have no idea where she got that quote.
Oh, so from this first one, right? This is the one that reminded you of it. So the context for this one is the poor are essentially led to think what they're supposed to think, either be it in religious doctrine, be it in like political doctrine, whatever. They're essentially led to think by people in positions of power, and the rich, or aka also known as people in positions of power, they're just led by their own ideas. They're not necessarily led by them. They're not necessarily their ideas. They're just the ideas that they hold, and they're controlled by those ideas. They don't necessarily control so much the ideas they have, because it's about their upbringing, it's about their social, like that's just like Theodore Adorno's, like, who's introduced this idea of critical theory, which has a lot to do with social justice and interpreting social ideas and social dynamics, and that's essentially like the context there a little bit.
The second quote you have down, I'm kind of, I'm sort of concerned about that, because it could also be translated as those, that some people can like view chains as like beliefs and standards, but they can also will be like there for protection, like for instance, is drugs and alcohol, like those who like try to move beyond the religious practice and standard of not trying that, and to try it can lead to addiction. So there's
The context for Rosa Luxemburg is that she's a bit of a socialist revolutionary, specifically a democratic socialist. Or no, she's not a democratic socialist. She was just I don't know exactly her beliefs, but she was killed by democratic socialists. That's where the idea came from. Okay, but essentially she was a really strong social critic, and she essentially talked about people not being able to recognize that they're oppressed sometimes, that sometimes they're in situations like of poverty, that prevent them from thinking about why they're in those situations of poverty. People are essentially end up accepting their position that they're born into, and they end up like succumbing to whatever vices, so they can ignore whatever they want.
Yeah, I know that there are times where that it would
Yeah.
be very helpful, but also.
I mean, I think it's possible to interpret all of these in a negative context, and to be honest, in the context of the biblical ones that you presented, I believe that, again, the death of the author, when people can interpret things in a lot of ways, and I think that it's possible to interpret almost anything in a really negative light, and by taking it out of context.
Yeah, I think that that's why it's so important to study either a person study what they wanted, like that, and what they, what kind of person and they were like, because people just is I learned that people will see what they wanna see. They believe what they wanna be. Believe what they wanna believe. Like two people can easily only look or read the same thing, but if they wanted to see something that's good, then they'll find some way to bend it to
Yeah.
but if they were expecting to see something negative, they'll try to bend that. That's why I think that it's so important to
Yeah.
study, to explore, to try to that we need to try to see things from the author's point of view, even if they're dead, even if they're not standing right beside you to explain it. It's vital to still research, to learn about it.
Yeah, even then though, that's like an issue where like even if you research about the author, you're gonna have to try to read into what they're saying and stuff like that. It's an issue of language. That's the claim that's being made. Like written language particularly is difficult, but even in the case of spoken language, a lot of meaning is lost a lot of the time, or changed, or warped. So it's very hard to kind of do that. So in any situation, even if you're taking into consideration what the author might have had to say, you're usually looking at texts, or looking at quotes, or looking at videos, and you're still trying to interpret the language that they're trying to say. So even if you do take into consideration of the author, essentially you're still having a situation where the words of the author have to be interpreted by you, right? So essentially it ends up just being your interpretation anyways, no matter what.
I personally think that the author's there's interpretation, especially considering the Bible, since God made it to be a guide for our lives, and our lives are extremely important. That the more important that it is, the more important it is to understand it, to understand and Him, what it was there for, what it's been put there for.
All right.
Or like vehicles of transportation, and it can be like cars nowadays can be used for they're used for houses for people, and Adam just used it for an art project, but the purpose of the vehicle was for transportation, and by the original old people, and that's the original people who made them. And
Yeah, but it's an equally fair interpretation to say, like, a van, yes, you can live out of a van. Maybe it wasn't built for that, but it's possible to comfortably live out of a van. Some people dislike the idea of like living in apartments because they don't want to have to pay rent and stuff like that, right? So just because you're using something in a way, like I think there's value in reinterpreting things sometimes, but I will say that there's there's a lot of times where people will interpret things in an extremely negative way, in extremely negative light. But however, at the same time, I think that's like an inevitable case, no matter what, even if it is a good interpretation, that there's going to be some warping from the original ideas that were trying to be represented. And this is not like a flaw of the text inherently, just to like, because I know you come from a religious background, this is not a flaw of God or whatever. It's a flaw of humans for not being able to interpret it perfectly, right? Like you acknowledge that humans are imperfect.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we, I think, can agree on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially.
Which is why it's extremely important to get at other people's opinions.
It's important to get guidance in general. I agree, even if you're not religious. I'm personally not religious at all, so, but I still find value in learning from the Bible, learning from these people, and their backgrounds, and just interpreting what's right and what's wrong, and to the best of my ability. And I think that's what everybody's doing, regardless of what they end up believing in the end. Simply because it's really impossible to get away from your own interpretation of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's why. Hey, it's also really important to get others' interpretation of it too, because as you said, everybody's trying to. anybody wants to do what they believe is right. Like, like criminals, they have you ever heard of a criminal who's actually said that he was a bad guy, claimed
Yeah.
that he was completely evil? It's very rare when that happens. And what they do, every time they break a law or hurt someone, they believe that it makes sense, which is just
Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes they admit they did something wrong. Sometimes people will say, "I did this thing that is wrong, but I don't care." That's the more common
Exactly.
opinion.
Feelings,
And sometimes
yeah.
the wrong things are done out of desperation, or done due to certain social conditions and economic conditions and stuff like that that are beyond any given individual's control, right? So that's where a lot of interpretation and context and nuance has to come in. So in general, yes, even I'm not talking about like interpreting the Bible directly, like including that, like even if I'm reading into other interpretations of people, like I'm reading the Cum Laude by like what's his name, gosh, Aquinas, right? Like then I'm still interpreting that text, and it's still my interpretation, no matter what. Like I can't escape that, because it's very hard to not have something other than your own interpretation of anything, right?
Yeah, but it's important to also be flexible to other ideas.
Yeah, I know. I'm not
It's-
saying.
it's-
I think
even-
I think
even
you're
if
missing. I think you're missing my point. I'm saying like you can go and seek out other ideas and other people's opinions and
yeah,
stuff like
But
that.
you also need to
but
be
inevit-
flexible to bend your original beliefs to
Yeah.
if there's
Yeah,
reason
yeah,
to.
yes, of course, you'll end up bending your original beliefs. That's possible. I'm saying that even if you do end up bending your original beliefs, it's still due to your own personal interpretation. You can't get away from your interpretation. I think it's important to I think it's important to recognize that, especially in the context of social justice, because you have to realize that people are only going to be able to see things from.
It's their own will. It's
Yeah,
their
even if
their
they
own choices.
even if they try to see things from other people's perspectives, it's essentially just going to end up going through theirs. So they're even if they're trying to look at the lens, like through the eyes of another person, they have to do that through their own eyes, right? So it essentially ends up having to come back to that individual. So you have to realize that, each individual, like it essentially is end up going to coming down to like individual ideas when it comes to changing an individual's ideas, right? It's not going to come to necessarily the perfect, so you shouldn't take offense to like you shouldn't say, no matter how perfect my text is, it's their fault if they don't get it, or they misinterpret it in the wrong way, right? But the thing is,
it's about individual
yeah,
choices.
it comes down to the individual's ability and choices and stuff like that, yeah. And I think,
we all have free will.
yeah, for sure. Like some people will argue against that, and I'm personally of the opinion that even if you do acknowledge that free will doesn't exist, there's no real way at this point in time to predict everything perfectly. So you're essentially acting based on free will anyways. Right. It's a really good discussion. Lots of philosophy. I like talking about that. I think, though, that this is good enough for this particular interview. I think it'll work very well in the context of our video and project. One more thing that I wanted to talk about. Do you want to have it just like all the recordings that we did in terms of the audio, just one right next to the other? Or do you want it to be done and just have one really long video that if a person feels like listening through all of it, they can? Or, and just have it be like a really nice long durational piece? Or do you want to maybe edit it down to the most concise points? I think I like the former personally, even though I'm not sure if I have enough space for it on my computer. I'll figure it out. I like the former personally because I think I like this idea of this kind of like raw and uncut. You know what I mean? I think it's more authentic.
Yeah.
I think we had a lot of authentic discussions with each other, so at least to the best of our ability, and it would be an injustice to both of us if we did try to edit it down. So we're good with that? As for the visual aspect, I do know that Doug tried to recommend to me to get people to acknowledge that it wasn't just like a still image or something like that, that there is an element of video. He referenced his own piece where it was just like a live feed of a painting, essentially completely still, and then right at the end somebody walks by it, or something like that, right? So do you want to have something like that? Right at the end, something will pop up and maybe text will move across that will say, this is a video or something like that. Or maybe that will happen occasionally at a certain interval, right?
Mhm.
You think that will be fine?
Yeah.
All right. I'll go ahead and send you a draft later on. All right, this is good. I think we have a lot of content to have. Really good project.